All right, welcome to a new episode of Yahoo Finance's Opening Bid, hosted here at the really absolutely amazing NASDAQ market site in Times Square in New York City, really where all of the cool financial happenings go down. As we say here on Opening Bid, let's get smarter and make a lot more money. Here with us today is Richard Socher, founder of U.com. Richard, good to see you. I just saw you at the Time AI dinner. We'll drop some names and stuff. You know, that's what we do. But good to see you in person. Thanks for doing this.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
So, look, we have 24 minutes. I mean, tell us how AI will change civilization. I mean, no pressure, right?
Happy to. I love AI in all its facets. Can talk about it at different time frames and time. Yeah.
What's capturing most of your time right now on the AI front?
I think the biggest thing is probably agents and how they will change work. I think over the next few years and maybe decades, almost every company will hit some kind of innovator's dilemma. In that the way they used to make revenue is going to change because a lot of their processes are going to get automated with AI. And that just changes the nature of the work that you're doing. You need to stop thinking about almost any repetitive process. Every time you feel like, oh, I've done this before, I'm just going through these steps, you should be giving those as a prompt to an agent and then get an accurate AI agent. There's also a lot of things that aren't very accurate. It's easy to build prototypes these days. It's hard to really get it into production. But once you give it to an accurate AI agent, it will just go through those steps for you. And I can give you a bunch of examples.
Yeah, so full disclosure, I had never heard of agents until our mutual friend, Mark Benioff, Salesforce co-founder and CEO, brought them up to me a couple weeks ago, and then I heard more about it at Dreamforce last week. How do you see agents interacting with the workforce?
So we've had agents at U.com for quite some time now, maybe 6 to 12 months. And the idea is that it's not just a large language model that predicts the next token and creates text for you, but you can think of these LLMs as essentially neural sequence models. They take any kind of sequence, they train on a lot of examples of such a sequence, and then they learn about that sequence type and then are able to generate new kinds of sequences. So what does that mean? Like a sequence could be a sequence of English words, and then you can have it write a poem or an email or a marketing campaign for you or a brief as an account executive in sales. The sequence can be sequences of programming languages and instructions. So all of a sudden now this will be programming for you, this kind of sequence model trained on code. And that will change all of programming. And of course, software is eating the world, AI is eating software, so there's a lot there. That sequence can also be a sequence of proteins, and all of a sudden you have a foundational model for biology. Proteins govern everything in our body, and that will change all of medicine in the next decades. Everything is slower in wetware, which is even, slower than hardware, which is slower than software. But the sequence can be a sequence of tones, and then you have music generation, can be a sequence of frames, you have video generation. A lot of things can be thought of as sequences that these large neural networks can train to understand.
Then why do we need humans? I'm listening to this, I'm like, I don't know. I mean, I guess I'm still needed as a host and to edit stuff. Am I really?
You are, because people want a human-to-human interaction,
okay.
Right? No one likes to see a robot jump off a cliff and do a proximity wingsuit flight. You want to interact with humans. You want to have human connection. I think there's still a lot there, but also this will only automate things that are repetitive. I think it's actually going to be exciting for humanity to do less repetitive things and focus much more on interesting tasks that require creativity, that require you to think outside the box and not just do the same thing over and over again. But to come back to the agents, now for agents, it's essentially a sequence of actions interspersed with often programming or language and other things. And so as an AI agent can essentially record what you usually do. An email comes in, then you click on these 5 things within either your CRM or your content management system or whatever it might be, and then it learns from those patterns, those sequences, and includes those actions. And so what that means is eventually an AI agent can surf the web for you. I think actually in the next few years, we're probably going to see more and more AI agents surfing the web for you than we have people surfing the web, which will change the web as we know it too and how it often monetizes. But it basically means that a lot of people will get access to their own personal assistant the way only really wealthy people have right now. And I think that's exciting.
That's a good thing. I can dig that. What happens then Mark made some pointed comments to me on Microsoft and Copilots, but I'm curious on what you think. What happens to the Copilot model?
I think the Copilot model is just a different sort of Microsoft terminology for agents. I think every software company is going to try to infuse that AI into all their existing products. I'm personally making a bet that with U.com, that we'll also have a new kind of software, which we call a productivity engine. It's different than in Word. In Word, you can have AI say like, okay, like finish this paragraph for me, or like change the style of this paragraph to be a little more formal, or fix my grammar, or translate this and whatever. You might do that in Word, but you also want to have an AI agent for knowledge that will go on the web for you, program something for you, and give you very accurate answers. And that is kind of a question like, when is AI going to just make an existing software product or general product better versus it creates this whole new category?
What do you think the average person should expect in terms of changes to how they interact with the internet? So I'll start with Yahoo. I go to yahoo.com, I type something in, it gives me a result. I go to Google, same thing. But how is that experience going to change over the next few years because of AI?
I think the publishing and news and media industry is going to change quite a bit. We're actually partnering with a lot of folks. We just announced yesterday a big partnership with Wort und Bild Verlag, a big German publisher in the medical space also. A lot of doctors read it, a lot of patients read it, and healthcare professionals. And the reason we're working with them is to help make articles much more interactive. Imagine you're reading an article and there's a bunch of terminology and you're like, I'm not familiar with that terminology. Just can you explain why are these two people like fighting against each other? Or like why did this company acquire this other company? How is that related to their other business model or to this industry? And so you can make everything much more interactive with these. And right now a lot of folks go to, ChatGPT or U.com to get those kinds of answers. U.com, they're more accurate and have citations and everything. But in the future, we want to enable the publishers themselves to have this technology accessible on their own site and have control sort of in what kinds of articles are going to get cited, what kinds of knowledge it refers to when it answers your questions, because you might on Yahoo Finance have your own set of articles, right?
That sounds like AI for good. Do you share some of the concerns on the other side, or do you share some of the concerns that AI won't be used for good?
This is a really tough question because there's so much hype around it, and AI is so complex. And not only is sort of the tide rising for a lot of things, and all the boats are rising, and there's a lot of goodness, but on top of it, there's sort of little bubbles that happen that burst. Right? There's some startups that raise hundreds of millions of dollars in their seed round, which as an investor means you kind of combine seed stage risk with late stage returns, which generally an expected value not ideal. And there's some hype also in it, but it's also clear the technology is working better and better. And so there are, in some ways, of course, downsides to almost every technology, right? You can go as basic as a hammer, which you can use to build a house, or use it as a weapon, right?
It's really morbid here for the morning. No, but you're right. You are right.
It's like hammers are great, right? You can use them for a lot of things. But like the internet's amazing.
Yeah.
And the internet also has some terrible content on it, like illegal content, things we do not want to see in the world. And now you could say, well, if there's illegal content on the internet, let's just make it slower. Let's make the hard drives smaller so you can store less illegal content. Let's make the pipes smaller, like you have less like transmission speeds for illegal content and so on. Or you can say, let's make content illegal and make the internet overall faster and better and so on. And I think we see similar things with AI, where some people say the number of parameters, they want to block those numbers. Actually currently a bill underway in California, which is terrible because it tries to regulate the abstract technology instead of the applications. I think what you're essentially asking for is how much we should regulate AI, and because we want to protect people from downsides. And it makes sense to regulate AI in its applications. I also don't want any random AI startup to drive by me on the highway at crazy speeds because they're just training their AI self-driving car.
It seems like though regulators are so far behind. Like I'm sitting here listening to you, and I met you before, but it's like you're already like operating 10 years forward, if not further. Like the regulators are are operating like 10 years behind. Like, how big a problem is that for society?
You know, it's kind of interesting. I'm originally from Germany, and as a European, I see how sort of some countries and just regions fall in this litigation versus legislation spectrum. And Europe tries to often regulate things before anyone gets hurt. The US just lets people often, not everywhere, like FDA, right, with like certain medications and so on, you can't just sell snake oil, but in a lot of places and areas of law, the US kind of lets thousand flowers bloom, and then if someone sues you, then they start the case law, you litigate, and then like law comes out of that. And that often means that the US has an easier time with innovation and actually let like technologies start to do something useful, and then if someone gets hurt, you get sued. And so I think Europe has actually slowed down quite a bit because they're trying to preemptively regulate an AI industry that honestly is very small in Europe in comparison to the US. And it's kind of getting stifled before it can even flourish. And so I think we need to regulate AI in its applications, you know, medicine, surgery. Again, I don't want some AI robot practicing its like first steps in my brain, right, in the middle of a surgery. So where it makes sense, you have to regulate it before it touches any human lives in a very major way. But like, I hope we don't regulate AI in terms of the number of parameters of the model. That just makes no sense to me.
I would let you operate on my brain on an AI model. If I'm going to let anybody, I'm going to let you do it, Richard. We'll be right back here on Opening Bid. Just going to say, we're having a mind-blowing conversation here at the NASDAQ market site, Times Square, New York City, with Richard Socher, founder of U.com. It's very rare to hear or talk to someone who is innovating in search, like, because there's just these dominating forces. I mean, as someone doing battle with Google, I mean, how unfair are they being on the internet? I mean, I'm sure you're watching the case and if they are broken up, I mean, but take us inside that race with the company.
Yeah, so we started as a search engine. It is indeed a very hard space to compete in. There's a lot of monopoly power that Google has. For instance, we have a browser extension. You can change your default URL navbar in the top of your browser to default to u.com. But when you install that extension, after a few minutes, there's a pop-up. And that pop-up has a OK button and a white button on white background in the bottom left. And if you just say, make it go away, then boom, Google is back to be the default in Chrome or Safari to be your default search engine. And so it was very hard. We lost a lot of people to that sort of dark pattern is what it's called. And that's just one of many examples. Of course, the fact that it's very hard on your iPhone at all to change your default in Safari was hard. Now, what we've also learned is that a lot of users ask fairly simple questions to Google. What's the score of the game? Like, what's the weather tomorrow? What's the stock price? How old is Obama? And the simpler the question and the shorter the answer, the harder it is actually to be 10x better. And that's where you want to be as a startup. You want to be 10x better than the incumbents. And so what we found is the people that actually enjoy getting really accurate, more complex answers are, to a small degree, students, and to a very large degree, knowledge workers. Like folks that need to take a big, complex marketing campaign and then say, all right, I'm getting this new feature from my product and engineering team. Go now, compare this to the competition. Who else has this feature? Describe it now for these two different industries that I usually have to market to. Now write me 3 LinkedIn messages and an email marketing campaign for it. And you just describe what you do usually when such a new document comes in from the rest of your company. And then it goes through all the steps, it does all the searches. And in many cases, our agents will actually replace 10 Google searches for you. And hence, we're actually 10x better for knowledge workers. So we're less and less describing ourselves as a search engine.
What has to happen, I guess, to make the industry more, or just make it fair, or make that competitive battle fairer? I mean, because it's so simple to say in media land, we'll break up Google, but what does that look like? And then, how would it help your business?
Yeah, Google is a very complex and large machine and beast. I think one area that could make sense is to separate search advertisement from having a search index. The index is very powerful and it's quite hard to build. We are building it at U.com too for a lot of our use cases. Actually now have a better index for web news, for instance, and a bunch of other slices of the internet. that we're also selling to customers, and they're making millions of calls a day in some cases, which is really exciting. So separating that, then of course there's a bunch of other stuff like their maps, Gmail, and so on. I think it could make sense in some cases to potentially split that up too, but I'm not really an expert in massive antitrust things. So,
what keeps you going in this battle? Like, what made you get involved with search?
So I've loved AI and natural language processing since 2003 when I started studying it back in Germany, and I think AI is the most interesting thing you could possibly do with your time right now. You know, there are certain times in humanity where certain technologies have their early days, right? And like 100 odd years ago, that was in physics, and you could discover the foundational elements of quantum physics and relativity, like Einstein's relativity theory and so on. And that time right now is AI. Like, you can change humanity and be part of that new step function productivity. You know, over 150 years ago, more than 90% of people worked in agriculture. If you ask those people in that moment, oh guys, like, imagine there's this big machine. If you stand in its way, you're gonna get crushed. But generally, if you
gonna get you corn, man.
If you let that machine just go on the field, right, it will do all this work. Now only 5% of people work in agriculture. That is a massive change to humanity. We're not doing more interesting things. I think we're seeing that again with AI. So I've loved AI for a long time, and language is, I think, the most interesting manifestation of human intelligence. Written language seems like one of the big requirements to have long-term civilizations. And so then you go double-click into language. Like, what's the most interesting thing is helping people with knowledge, helping people learn things, be more productive with their knowledge, summarize things. One of our official incorporation name is actually Sozzi for summary search, before we got a few weeks later u.com URL. From Mark. There's a fun story on the side there. But helping people learn, deal with this massive influx of information that we currently have, synthesize it, make them more productive, feels incredibly meaningful.
If people aren't picking up on this now, Richard is very plugged into the AI industry and investing in the future of AI. Every day, or it's not every day, but it feels like every day, there's a new upstart raising capital at some really eye-watering like valuation. What do you make on some of these AI valuations and the companies fetching these valuations? Does it feel frothy? Does it feel right to you given where the technology is and where it can go?
It's a really tough space to navigate. I've been investing since the exit of my first startup in a lot of companies, been very fortunate to have various unicorns invested in seed stage rounds, and now kind of are scaling this up at AIX Ventures, my venture fund. And what we're seeing often are early stage rounds that have just too high of a valuation for where the risk is. And what that means is you often end up with seed stage risk and late stage returns, which an expected value is not an ideal setup. And so I do think a lot of AI investors are probably going to struggle also. Now, it doesn't mean that none of those early stage, highly valued companies will work out, right? Some certainly will, it's just the risk is not quite right. And so at the same time, we do think that pretty much every industry out there is going to change, right? And will get disrupted. And there's some obvious ones like SaaS for work, you know, everything kind of sales, service, marketing, but also knowledge work, analysts, biotech researchers. We have, just at u.com to give you a sense, like we have one of the largest hedge funds in the United States as a customer. We have universities that are customers. We have cybersecurity companies, biotechs, publishers, and news media organizations. All of them, when we do these workshops with them and we say, hey, turns out your sales team can also use the software, your marketing team can also use the software, your developers can also use this. They're like, oh my God, like so you see all the light bulbs going off. So there is a huge impact on pretty much every industry out there. I think physical industries are gonna take a little bit longer to iterate. So your plumber is not collecting data about how he changes the pipes, right?
I don't want my plumber knowing how and when I went to the bathroom. Let's just be honest here. I mean, it's a podcast, you can pretty much say whatever you want. But like, what do you look for? Like, how do you know you're not being sold a bunch of like smoke and mirror by an AI company that in some respects, maybe you don't know the leaders and you're meeting for the first time?
Right, so at AIX Ventures, we sort of have a different kind of model from like general venture funds where we have AI experts, like deep practitioners, professors at Stanford, Berkeley, founders in AI like myself, who have a full-time job in AI, staying current, staying up to date. And then we partner with sort of the traditional venture full-time teams that basically do what you would expect from a venture fund. They help you with go-to-market, help you with marketing, with hiring, and things like that. And so I think what that means and what we're looking for is a combination of companies that are, and founders that are AI native, as well as have deep industry insights. So we're not trying to invest in a bunch of hammers looking for nails, which is also a thing in AI, right? You see Nvidia and a lot of other companies in the tooling space that are trying to sit on top of that, building tools, and not all of those early stage startup tools actually are really needed at scale by a lot of people. And so we're looking at for deep industry insights. And there's a lot of exciting stuff happening. For instance, biotech, like all of medicine and drug development is going to change in the next few years thanks to AI.
You mentioned NVIDIA, and I can tell you, NVIDIA, the Yahoo Finance community is obsessed with NVIDIA. They love NVIDIA. But as someone like really in the trenches with AI, I mean, how important is that technology for NVIDIA? I mean, because the way we look at it, like this company is the best thing since sliced bread. But are we right?
I think NVIDIA is an amazing company. They're also the second largest investor in U.com in our Series B that we just announced a few weeks ago. I was extremely impressed with Jensen when I had a one-on-one conversation with him. He's incredibly well-read, loves history too. I gave him sort of this answer about the Peloponnesian War, and he's like, "Oh, are you mentioning this Thucydides, I think, researcher or historian?" And indeed, it was mentioned in the summary, and I was like, "Whew, good thing."
You got nervous in front of Jensen? Like, what is that like?
He's so friendly. It's I don't generally get that nervous with most people, but it was very impressive to hear him giving advice and so on. So I do think it's the right time, the right place for this company. It's also clear that they're thinking about not just the GPUs, but moving up the stack, and I'm very excited about NVIDIA.
What type of advice would a Jensen give you? I mean, as someone who, you've been in this industry seemingly forever. Like, what does he tell you? I mean, he doesn't tell you just work hard because you're working hard. Like, what does he say?
There are a bunch of things. There was a fairly long conversation, almost 2 hours in the end. But one of that was really interesting is that he said in the beginning he focused a lot on speed of NVIDIA, but then at some point realized that the best way is to focus on gaming at first and like really dominate that niche. It's not his exact words, but sort of how I interpret it, which is generally good startup advice, and then expand from there. And still remember in 2011-12, my research group at Stanford, Andrew Ng's AI group, we were trying to buy more and more GPUs. And at the time, NVIDIA was like, who are you? Why are you trying to buy our GPUs? You're not even the graphics group, right? Which is sort of traditionally where they had sold most of the GPUs. And now, of course, we have GPUs that don't even have a graphics out, right? They're just for AI workloads.
We're out of time. Richard, I could do this for another 5 hours. This is fascinating stuff, but I can't. I have to go. Richard Socher, founder of U.com. I mean, what you're working on is fascinating. I encourage everyone to check out the site because it's definitely worth your time. Richard, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
All right, that's it for the latest episode of Opening Bid from the NASDAQ market site in New York City. I'm Brian Sozzi. We'll talk to you soon.